you. So now it's time to ask some questions to you and to see if you can interact a bit with this panel. We prepared a few questions to you. They will come on the screen. Maybe we can share my screen here, which is the additional HDMI cable on the stage. Yes. So if you all take out your mobile phones, your smartphone, you can either scan this QR code or go to QandR.eu and use that code to log in, and then we will soon see number of people entering. Right, you see that number running. So we'll wait a bit till you are all there, and then you can later on use your phone as a voting machine to answer the questions, and then the answers come out, and we can reflect as a panel on those questions. These questions were prepared partly also by the panel, so we know what's coming a little bit, and then we can discuss the outcome. It's my job here to keep talking until you're all logged in, so I'm happy to do so. So we have, I think we are about double that number in the room now, so let's just wait a bit more. I just assumed you all had a smartphone. Okay. So I will soon go to the first question, and then but this code will remain in the picture, so you can still log on through the website if you want. So first question, it was actually so just go back to the program. This is the presentations we've just seen. So first one, I go through them one by one. So first one was actually, this is almost like a quiz now, because I think you almost gave away the answer during the presentation, Fons, on this one. But the question is like, in 2035, what do you expect that will happen? And we can see the voting is happening. You can also change your vote, of course. So it's like all over the place right now. And of course, if you feel really the urge to comment on this question, Guilhem over there still has the microphone, so you can also take the floor and interact a bit with the panel.
Ja, Fons, we gaan naar vessels.
So, Fons, anything you want to maybe say on?
Yeah, this is interesting to see. Maybe I've been too convincing in my statement, because this may be a bit different from the general view, I think, with where the quayside crane import is still seen as the main solution. But it's nice to see this spread. So there is definitely an innovation challenge, I think, to enable those floating-to-floating lifts, because it will be rather complicated to lift 300 or tons or heavier components even at 100 or 150 meters above sea level from one floating vessel to the other.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. But I hear a little bit of noise in the room, so there's a lot of opinions on this, I guess. So who wants to take the microphone in the audience? If you're still talking, then we just give you the microphone. Anybody wants to comment? No? What's that?
It's very silent.
Okay, yeah. This is the way to do that. You just.
Hello, my name is William Otto, working at Marin. I was just wondering, Fons, you were talking about the many units to be installed. And I think there are not so many heavy lift vessels in the world. So should Saipem or Heerema invest, or what's your view?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The problem is that these floating wind farms are still projections. So you have to take some risk, I would say, to invest in such a vessel today. I think a couple of years back, Seaway 7 did a study into heavy lifting for floating wind farms, and at that time they concluded that the market is actually too small to justify the investment in a dedicated vessel. So even one vessel for this. So, but probably the solution is in designing a vessel which can also do floating to fixed lifts, because then you can install bottom-founded wind turbines using a floating vessel, and then the market is much bigger, and that allows you to move through this transition phase. And but yeah, if it I think if floating becomes as big as it is, then there will be a need for multiple vessels. Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm also keeping time here at the same time, so I think that was kind of an interesting discussion, and we can all reflect on that later in the break. So I'm going to move to the next question here now. This is more about the floating solar part, of course, the other source of energy, and here we can sort of estimate like what do you think will happen first? Do you think there's a future for floating solar first in the North Sea or first in the Mediterranean? So I think as an audience looking at this, we're maybe a little bit more outspoken towards one direction, Don. So you know where to go looking at this. But some people also vote for the North Sea. So I'm also curious to learn who. I think is a question over there with Bonjoon or not? No question. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So you want to say something about this, Don?
Yeah, I think I can. This was also my first idea, that the Mediterranean would be first. It would also be more logical, right, from our irradiance and a sea state perspective. What we actually see is that the current offshore wind tenders are really on the North Sea are really pushing also solar in the mix. So maybe the North Sea will be first, I would say.
Okay, that's surprising to many people in the room then, I guess. And there's one question there.
Hello, I'm Daniel from Petrobras, Brazil. I was just wondering, how do you consider, the impact in terms of maritime traffic for like such high area solar panels floating?
Yeah, as what I said, it's we need less space per gigawatt hour than offshore wind. So you can easily place them inside the offshore wind parks. There's ample space there already. So and those parks are already closed, so I'm not so much worried about marine traffic in general. Of course, in the park itself, you should have dedicated traffic routes for the jackups to go to the offshore wind turbines. So there would be a bit more planning, I would say, but in general, there's a lot of space.
Richard Leeuwenburg, Blue Water. A response or maybe follow-up question on what you just mentioned, that you say, I expected the Mediterranean first instead of North Sea, but you see now a kind of something else. Is that because of the business case, or is it more that the North Sea is more, say, on the pilot studies? So it's more a trial field, or is it really from business perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question, I think. So I think the business case in the Mediterranean is easier to make, definitely. However, in the North Sea, you see from the AZK, from the government request, RVO, like that they want to have grid stability, and it becomes and LCOE of offshore wind is of course important, first of all, but also the focus is shifting more to grid stability, and if that comes into the mix, then you need a solution which has a completely different output profile over the year. And that's what's making offshore floating solar interesting. And then the LCOE is becomes a different discussion.
Thank you. Good talk, I think. Maybe one more and then we go to the next one. Jaap Harm over there.
Yeah, thank you, Jaap Westhuis, SBM Offshore. All very interesting presentations. But just to follow up on the floating solar question, one of the comments that is being made when it comes to this floating solar is to really look at the efficiency of the supporting weight structure compared to the watt peak. So we already heard the Fons mentioning roughly 20 megawatt turbines require order of magnitude of 4,000 tons of steel. So, and the average capacity factor of a good wind farm is 50%, and of a good floating solar farm 25%. So if you all factor that in, what is your view from a company and product development perspective in reaching acceptable tonnage of material, being it steel or aluminium, per watt peak average, not watt peak installed?
Yeah, maybe the easy answer is that we have a lower tonnage per watt peak and gigawatt hours than offshore wind, floating wind, not fixed wind, but floating wind. That's what we currently see. So it's a point to focus on indeed. Yeah.
That's a short answer. Are you satisfied, Jaap Harm? Okay, lunch.
And maybe one thing to add, I think it's also compared to offshore wind, you see really the trend to bigger turbines, which makes it's attractive for Hirma and these kind of companies with the big ships. What we really aim for is going also on the installation and the OPEX side on much smaller ships. So also the rollout phase will be much easier than going to bigger offshore wind solutions.
Yeah, less material. Yeah, very interesting. Another question from you, Don. Actually, this was like, how do you think the energy is most likely to be exported in the Mediterranean? Let's assume we are somewhere in the middle of the Mediterranean, right? So right between Spain and Italy, and we have a large field of floating solar. How are we going to export that energy to shore?
Maybe the question was more how to get it to the Netherlands. So if you produce it in the Mediterranean, how to get it to the Netherlands?
Okay, that didn't fit the title, but that's fine. So a bit of clarification sometimes helps. Huh? So how do we get it to the Netherlands? So if you get it from the Mediterranean. Okay, well, this is going to give some debate later today, I guess, because it's almost equal. Anybody wants to say something? We see maybe hydrogen or ammonia pipeline from. Is that what we think, or is it going to be shipping, or what is the? Yeah, there's a question here.
Maarten van der Klip from Pro Capital. Well, I think on the submarine cable you have less loss, and you will have loss on hydrogen and ammonia. So of course it's nice for shipping that there will be shuttle tankers and tankers, but and they can have the flexibility. So I put myself right in the middle. I think it will be a combination that the base load will go via submarine cable, but that depending on where it is needed, the hydrogen and ammonia, it will actually go by ship. So I think it will be a combination.
Okay. You want to respond to that, Don? Or you have
Yeah, that's. I'm even not sure how it will go. Indeed, from an efficiency perspective, you see that the high voltage DC cables are quite interesting. Recently, it was announced that there will be a cable from Morocco to England. On the other hand, in the past, there were projects from Algeria to Germany, which didn't make it. I think from geopolitical perspective, it's also quite complex to put cables because it's they're fixed to their location. So in that sense, ships are relevant because at least they can sail somewhere else if there's somewhere war. So I'm not sure how that will develop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, because when I was in Desertec back 15 years ago in solar business, but concentrated solar power, we had a huge headache, and obviously what we saw in terms of technology prospect did not exist at the time. But based on our modest analysis as NG that I've just shown, definitely when you reach a certain distance, hydrogen pipe makes total sense. That's for the technical part, and TenneT has made it clear then they cannot swallow in the grid gigawatt of renewable energies. We've made some studies where we've modeled the Netherlands, and we've demonstrated that the lowest curtailment is when you capture the electricity energy into hydrogen. So it's not one against the other, it's complementary, and that's huge. There are huge infrastructure investment in the grid that could go to hydrogen in order to ensure security of supply. That's for the technical part. Then geopolitically, when you develop project in Morocco, based on what I've done so far with the team, I can tell you that the ship has a huge flexibility because you can bring it around. You have what we do today with LNG. You can redirect them, and that flexibility should not be underestimated. So we have to look at both aspects. And then with the regulatory framework, the CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, you have to fit into the regulation to do a business case. So I think these three aspects needs to be taken into account here.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's an interesting step also to the, let's say, more the green FPSO part. That is the next question. But we have one question in the room here still, I think.
Yeah.
In the back.
I'll maybe hand
okay,
over.
there's two.
I'm just wondering, why would you be transporting this renewable energy, stored renewable energy? Why would you be transporting that to the Netherlands? there's a huge demand in the Mediterranean region. Wouldn't you just be using it there?
So maybe I can react to that right away. In the study we've made, where we've modeled the Netherlands and Europe, projecting the world in 2050 with full electrification, another scenario was full blue hydrogen and full hydrogen backbone from Gasunie, green hydrogen and blue hydrogen. What we've seen is what I said in terms of curtailment, but also systemically you cannot make it with the local renewable content, even with the 60 gigawatt overseas. Why is that so? Is that when the wind stops blowing, it stops blowing on all the assets. So you have a major risk, plus an interseasonality issue here that you need to tackle. That's one. Second, there's a question of cost. Either you produce locally, like in the High Netherlands framework with local infrastructure, or you produce overseas with super low cost. And perhaps there's still a romantic view on this, because I have to highlight that on top of the cost, there's also the load factor. Even in Chile, in Atacama Desert, you have a load factor of 33%. It's very low. You're not producing all the 800, 400 hours a year. So these are the considerations why we are considering to import towards Europe. Because we know there will be import at the end of the day. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but in that model, are you only looking at wind and solar, or are you factoring wave, tidal, geothermal, microhydro, and all of the other renewable energies?
Yeah, you're right. We've mainly looked at solar and wind onshore. Wind offshore offers a good prospect as well as the other technologies we've seen so far. Good point.
Okay, just one more and then we continue.
Yes, hello, this is Nikos from Ricardo Energy and Environment. Yeah, I think it's also in this, let's say, challenge, it's not only about how to transport energy, but basically how do you ensure the off-takers, and also that when there will be offshore generation of energy in the Mediterranean. As here in the Netherlands, this is being part of the targets and goals for renewable energy generation. So if you're also producing in a specific country, then this production is part of a bigger plan to cover the energy requirements, especially with this geopolitical crisis. So in, let's say, the debate, I would say it's very localized between countries, yeah, and also between off-takers. What do you think about this? How do you make sure when you invest in one and the other direction, basically, to have the off-takers there?
So shall I take that?
Yeah,
one?
you can.
So as a project developer, what I can say about that is there are two aspects. The technology risk in terms of system risk. Alkaline electrolyzer have been running at 160 megawatt in the year 60s in Norway based on hydropower. So per se, people say, okay, TRL9, easy. But the legislation, the European legislation asks for temporality. So basically your electrolyzer needs to stop when wind offshore stops. I won't make it too technical here. But that brings, you have zero technical benchmark and financial benchmark. So that means for such high capex intensive, even if the power is the largest cost of the hydrogen, it's still capex intensive, you need long-term agreement. Which brings you to the off-taker and discussing with a sector that has been, because we're doing sector coupling, which is thinking merchant very often, and thinking also in terms of lowest cost, because they are still in the mindset of the upper value chain, all based I've shown so far. So at some point you will have the regulation either incentivizing renewable-based e-fuels, or penalizing the ones that do not play the game, and you will have a scissor effect on the cost. But it has never been seen that emerging product like this come into the market beating the conventional product that have been there for 50 years. And it's a painful discussion for the time being because the legislation is not in place. My personal guess is that when the legislation is in place and it's imminent with the delegated act, players, shipping companies will turn to see the infrastructure project and realize there's a shortage on supply, and there we will be able to talk.
Yeah.
So
I think this is maybe a good point to stop this part of the discussion. There's a lot more to say about this, I know, because this is a chicken egg problem, right? You have you need, it's like the same with cars. You can buy an electric car, but you have to have a place where to charge it, and that's the same with shipping, of course. Now we had a little bit of a talk about what about the Mediterranean and the North Sea, and in the meantime, you've all discovered I put the world map here, so you can extrapolate this discussion to a wider area. So we put a question here, like, how do you think if we could produce floating with floating assets, e-fuels? If you would have this FPSO idea somewhere in the ocean, what would be a good location and why? So if you take the microphone, I'd like to learn why you think you choose for a certain location in this map. So we already have had some time to pick locations, and we did this exercise yesterday in the Green FPSO GIP meeting. We got also quite a scattered plot, which means that people see opportunities quite around the globe for this. But anybody wants to say something about why you choose a certain location, or maybe, yeah, I see Kevin in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. I mean, it depends what you're developing the e-fuels for and what the markets are going to be. If it's 2050, then you're looking at massive population growth in sub-Saharan Africa. Are we looking at an economic model that is still going to be importing huge amounts of consumer goods to Europe, or are we going to see reshoring of that material? So I think rather than just looking at the offshore production of the e-fuels, we need to be looking at the markets for those. And right now, for example, EV use is is growing extremely fast in China, as opposed to Europe. So it really depends where you're going to be using the fuels.
Yeah, and there's multiple drivers in this discussion. Anybody wants to respond to this? You want to? Yeah.
I can respond. It's very interesting to see these dots, but it's about the story behind it. Thank you very much. You're completely right. And yesterday, niche market is obviously in the north part of South America, in the Caribbean. If you feed it directly to an island. When we were looking at our proposal earlier on, we specifically looked at Europe because that is our place, and also we were looking into subsidy. So then if you plan something which is in Asia, I was actually expecting a little bit more dots in the region of Japan, but that is, I don't know, so interesting question.
Yeah. You can still change the location of your dot after this. Thank you. Yeah. Is there another question in the back there, I think? Dank je.
Hi, Maddie McLean, Zero Emission Ship Technology Association. The one option that we don't have in this is the option of mobile production units. And there's quite a number of projects coming online that are actually producing hydrogen with wind ships, vessels propelled by the wind, that are actually taking that energy instead of transporting goods. They're using that energy to produce hydrogen. So my answer would be we can produce energy or produce fuels anywhere where there's wind. So moving dots.
Yeah, moving dots. Maybe somebody needs to move his dots continuously. That's another option. Yeah. Thank you.
There's one here.
Yeah. I think we're getting a response to your question there. Felix.
Thank you. Good morning all. So I'm Felix. I'm coming from Far Wind Energy. So we develop those energy ships. So thanks for the introduction. And my point is the rose dot. So in the Caribbean actually, where there is let's say an even better wind resource than in North Sea. but let's say in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. So, and there, what's interesting is that we have a lot of obviously maritime, let's say, transportation, and it's directly close to different location of directly distribution. So what we do in short, yes, is producing, let's say, e-fuels based on far offshore wind, where a typical, let's say, conventional offshore wind turbines and floating wind turbine cannot be deployed because of the water depths.
Thank you, Felix. I think that's a good addition. Anybody wants to respond to this? I think from what I learned from this is that there's a balance between where's the market, but also where's the energy availability, and where's the technical possibilities to harvest the energy and to convert it. Okay, you can debate should it be a moored system or a moving system. That we can do over lunch and in the coffee breaks. You want to respond to that?
No, not responding. I don't have the capacity to tackle offshore question, unfortunately. But I'm wondering how it happens geopolitically when you producing offshore. Who's owning the energy nationally? Because when I was in Desertec, that was what was blocking the initiative, basically. Is somebody aware of how does that articulate? So I don't want. Well, I'll give you my. There's an answer over here. Yeah. Right.
This next question already, but we had the same question when we launched this ID, and we had classification societies, DNV and BV, hopefully answering this question. They didn't have an answer straight away. They need to study it.
Yeah.
The maritime law and.
So we did already a study on that, a legal study on that. So that was actually the first study that we commissioned. And basically, if you're not a military ship, you can enter, let's say, EEZ and as well the territorial waters of different countries. So that's open. And if you're using renewable sources like wind or solar, those sources are. If you're not, let's say, an installation, and we are ships, so we're not an installation, then you're free to use that. So if you're selling ships, you don't need to have an authorization to use the wind to propel your ship, and that goes. So it's a kind of obvious, obviously, but it's good to mention. And in the, let's say, international waters, obviously, it's a bit more open.
Okay, thank you for that response. In the meantime, we are selling hydrogen for the lowest bidder. Who puts one? Maybe somebody too shy to maybe quickly change the one to another number. But so somebody has to. I see €5, 5.5.
Thank you, Timon Hartmans, Jumbo Maritime. We learned from Mr. Niels Grobet that you can do it onshore for €2 a kilo. So. ×3 for offshore always works, so yeah. €6. I see everyone is with me, so that's good.
Anybody wants to respond to that?
The question is, of course, who wants to pay this factor 3 then? And that needs to come from subsidy or from your will to be geopolitical independent. But otherwise, it's of course a competitive market, and you need to go for the price, the lowest price. And when we talked with Tata Steel, for instance, they have also these internal models, and they are looking much lower values than this. Of course, they start with a low number, and then it will be a debate where you end. But we need to aim pretty low, I think.
Also, we are preparing. We have prepared a few more slides on the interactive side. So if you go again to the login, so on the right side there's the QandR.eu, and its code is 8662, and then you should be able to enter the answer to this question, which we prepared together with Philippe Lavogna about what do you think more on the terminal side, like what is the present day state of the art technology for transferring all these new e-fuels. So we put a couple of different types of e-fuels here, like ammonia, liquid hydrogen, compressed hydrogen. So which ones do you think we can today, with present-day technology, already offload or bunker to a given vessel? And let's see. We can also choose all of the above. If you think all that is already possible, no problem at all. We can just implement it. So there's quite some optimism in the room, Philippe, I think. Huh? We have about almost 40%, maybe 50%. Guess it's all of the above. We get about 50% thinks that everything is possible, and about 1/6 for each is. But we can, so you can just reflect on that. You can just stay on this. Yeah. So, anybody who said? Let's see some hands. Who did say that all of the above is possible? That's the safe answer, because it should be about 50% of the room raising their hand now. Yeah. So, if somebody wants to comment on why you think that's possible? No? Sorry? There's something, somebody wants to say something there?
No, I just meant that it's a matter of cost.
Matter of cost.
I mean, to be very strict, we should know what are the sea states and vessels, but I mean, all of them are technically possible.
Okay. So all the different fuels. So the cryogenic one, the compressed one, and also the ammonia one is okay. So what did you think, Philippe?
So basically, the one that is difficult, we are talking about offshore transfer. So we need a flexible element, okay? And the trick is for liquid hydrogen, minus 252 degrees Celsius, so 20 degrees Kelvin. To my knowledge, it's not possible to have a flexible application. So you can have a flexible that is used in static way when it's cold, but it cannot be used cold in a dynamic way. Okay, so that kills offshore transfer for liquid hydrogen today. Then the first one with today, it's not qualified. Compressed hydrogen, we could do it, but we need to qualify it because hydrogen is a very tiny molecule, and we need to check it. But it's well possible to do it, but it's not qualified yet. So that's the trick with the today's. B, I just explained it's not possible, and ammonia is basically possible. We are qualifying it, and it's just a done deal. We need to do the test to confirm it's feasible.
Yeah. So Philippe, one question from my side: Are people nowadays already working on the liquefied hydrogen technology for offloading in wave, like flexibles that can be used in a dynamic way, like you just explained?
So we, SBM, we are not working on it because it's not our business. But the Trelleborg and the Dunlop people we are talking to for bonded hose, they don't see it. Mm-hmm. And I did not ask a question to Technip and the like.
Maybe but, people in the room that want to comment on this question.
Is there someone from Technip?
Would be interesting to have a short discussion on this.
There are 19 people who can do it in here. So.
I can confirm that I've spoken with Chart about it, and they, agreeing with you that nothing's flexible that cold. So
okay, nothing flexible and dynamic. But other people are working on this. As you know that you may not want to share. That's also fine. But
20 degrees Kelvin is a big challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not working on it.
Okay, you're not working on it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. 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 So
this question here.
Question over here. Yeah.
Olaf, with respect to ammonia, I always get some sort of problem with safety issues if I hear ammonia. And of course we can do it offshore, but still we have a crew around. So can the group comment on that side? The safety side
you talk about toxicity of ammonia? What is the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a leakage, somebody attacking a terminal, just to make it a bit broader.
Yeah.
So good point. That's the reason we invest our energy into it to have a safe approach to it, because the big risk is indeed toxicity. If there is a major leak, we kill a lot of fishes, and not only fishes. So it's paramount to make it safe. So the risk you have been talking about, parrot and so on, bon, yes, this one, if someone is attacking in the middle of no flooding, it will be a bit difficult. Then we could reduce the inventory. So that's the reason where, for example, the TLU will have a shorter flexible pipe, which will be a smaller inventory. Could be reducing the risk if we are exposed to this type of risk. With a floating hose, indeed, we are more exposed with more inventory. So it's case per case basis, but definitely we have to have the right mindset, because this could kill that line of business. A project that has a major leak, no more. It's a Chernobyl of the case.
Yeah. So we have to get it right at once, I think, then. Yeah. You want to?
If I could just mention, I mean, yeah, we don't have the regulatory framework yet for these alternative fuels in blue ocean shipping. So hydrogen, ammonia, even methanol, I think, is now being developed, but there's still work to be done on that. So, we've got. I think it's right that the industry goes ahead of that, but there's going to be some, if we go back over something like the ballast water situation, where we had a real debacle with the regulation, and suddenly a lot of the first movers were really, really damaged by the change of regulation, the change of direction. So I think the industry is very, very aware that they've got to get it right, and also those early demonstrator vessels have to absolutely be 100% safe. So it's going to be a big challenge, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it's not just the vessels; it's also the operations. Yeah, like we. Yeah.
So I forgot to mention.
Yeah.
It's worth mentioning. The part at risk is a flexible part. So this part is flush between offloadings, and if we are in a dangerous zone, then we minimize it and we make it aerial. That's the idea. But indeed, we make it. We will account for all those parameters.
Okay. I saw that the vote was just shifting by one. So I think we conclude on this topic. Any last question on this? Yeah, over there.
I have just one last remark. It's about offshore transfer. I think it's important to consider as well that if we're talking about offshore transfer, is it for bunkering purposes or simply transfer from production center to a large demand center? Because if you're talking about bunkering of fuel, and if you're talking about compressed hydrogen, for example, the fill rates are quite low. When we're talking about hydrogen into bunkering later on, but if we're talking about fueling vessels, then the fill rates would be okay, but it would take a lot of time. So these are also factors we need to consider. I mean, for this specific topic, not simply for the odds for transfer in general. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution. Anyone wants to respond? Yeah, please go ahead.
Just hearing at the feedbacks given, from a banking perspective or financing perspective, that's often seen as a risk. And bear that in mind that if you go to a financier, or if it is equity, or if it is if you're in development stage, use the subsidies and get the first pilot going, like shown here. Then have a demonstrator project that it is feasible and it fits within the ESG requirements. And it's also, like Bas mentioned, for Maren, safety. That the safety element is tested, validated. And then the next phase, well, then it becomes bankable, financeable. Before that, it's still pilot stages. A lot of these questions come, for example, to banks and or also alternative financiers and say, hey guys, this is already zero emissions, but have you considered this complete change? Well, we've got an approval in principle. Well, approval in principle, nice, but make first a pilot and then address it with what is going to be the financing request. And I think that's good, just an addition on how we see questions going, and that it should be that it is basically post a pilot case.
Yeah, thank you for that. And from a financial perspective, do you also see a way to bridge that gap? In that pilot stage, you also need to overcome certain. You have to make investments also. Is that something you are looking into from a financial perspective to sort of accelerate the innovations? Is that?
Yes, and then we basically look at the names and the reputations behind. Take, for example, the cases on SBM, and that's reputable, and also Blue Water, that's reputable names working together with industry standards, going to the next phase. And we're now in a phase that it's even okay to link startups to that. And it's okay that that's one which I think is good going forward, that you already take your end client with you in this route. There are a lot of shipping companies willing to trial, willing to test solar, willing to test energy saving devices, and then with a long-term perspective, keep that in mind, long-term perspective, 2050, this will be so much. This will have saved so much ton of CO2.
So you have to have a sort of an impact pathway analysis.
Yeah.
I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, there's also the aspect. I mean, we're developing a sort of wind propulsion testing accelerator program at the moment, and one of the things is for the OEMs, and especially the really small ones, is that they don't have the capacity to get over the bar for a lot of this stuff. The capacity to apply for loans, to even come into and sign agreements with larger entities. The compliance there is very high. So we're trying to search for ways and partners to actually lower that bar, to actually support these OEMs coming through the process. Because quite often what we're seeing is they'll get to the pre-market stage, and that's actually, they think that's quite often, we've made it. But actually that's exactly when they're probably the least bankable, but the highest demand on their finance at that point. And to get it over into that demonstrator process is a tough one. So generous financial entities always welcome.
Thank you. So that's a nice bridge to the next interactive slide, because before accelerating it starts with the ideas. And earlier in this session, we had one slide where you were asked about your awesome innovation. So maybe there's some ideas you can just share with the audience. Of course, we have to share the IP as well. So any good idea is on the table for. You want to share an idea? Yeah, you can use your phone.
There you go, wind propulsion. Thank you. Stop now.
Yeah. Wind propulsion. So you can vote for wind propulsion as well. But slow steaming, so just reduce the speed, less energy consumption. Super high density batteries. Nuclear power. Wind and tidal together. Can you comment on that a bit further?
Wind in the air and wind in the water.
Yeah.
Just popped up.
Yeah.
No.
I added it for you.
Okay. Yeah.
You can also vote on other people's innovation, then it becomes bigger.
Yeah. But I don't see people taking picture from the screen yet, so I guess
I will.
We still wait for the brilliant idea to come in. Still some ideas come in. So nuclear, is that a serious option for the shipping part? Can we comment on that a little bit? Anybody wants to comment on that?
Well, I can take. I raised this as a question. What's the next, and what's the super? And of course, nuclear is chimney zero emission, but on the end, it's going to take at least decades before we get there, especially on shipping. But seeing these, a lot of these things can be done today. And my take for a bit provocative, putting it 2030, start utilizing it now and give that as an advice towards and challenge the ship owners whom you're talking to. For example, the reduced speed. What can you do with virtual arrival time? What can you do to test superconductors? Utilize combination of slow steaming and wind. Things you can trial already today, and then you have the knowledge to roll it out. So take one or two of your vessels, or if you're a technology provider, get the ship owner to embrace and test it for you. And start testing, because that's the way you start learning, by walking the walk.
Yeah, of course, the risk profile of pilot projects in nuclear can be even much higher than ammonia, for example, because of the consequences if something goes wrong, of course. So there is we need to think maybe on how can you experiment new technologies without having big risk for technical risk also for environment and ecology.
Well, it's from a financing perspective, I see nuclear. Yes, there's an upside, but the downside is even bigger.
Okay,
and we just leave it at that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it becomes too. I understand. Yeah. All right. So while talking, new ideas came. Yeah, you want to respond?
Sorry, very quickly. I'm not going to comment on nuclear.
We're here to talk on this.
Yeah, I have quite a personal connection with that. So, but what I was going to say, by the way, I love the person who put rowing. I thought I was old school with wind. Brilliant. See me afterwards, yeah. So, but no, one thing that I was going to say is actually, these are all, these are all great, but I think one of the themes or one of the threads that's coming through is modularization, is interchangeability of systems. And I think, even something as simple as making the electric drivetrain system more efficient and easier to use on larger ships would mean that you can plug in and plug out the technology that you require for that. So if it's a genset, or if it's a fuel cell system, or it's batteries, plugging those in when you have them, plugging them out when you don't have the option for that. And the same can be done for wind. Containerized wind systems, even Flettner rotors can be lifted on and off their foundations within a few hours. We've just had an installation on a ferry that didn't come out of operation. Just came in for the night, put the rotor on, and she was out the next morning without a break in the thing. So I think modularization and, of course, digitalization and the business models that creates, leasing, etc., could be a real game changer for almost all of these technologies that are being suggested.
Thank you. I think you are doing a good job as a panel, because now I see also people start making movies and pictures of the screen and the discussion. So people get inspired. That's good to see. Is there any last comment from the audience that you want to make on this discussion, or some feedback or other ideas? Shout outs? No?
Find a new ship. A new shape.
New shape. Okay. Yeah, that's optimization for reduction of resistance. Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's. We are soon entering the break, so that's something we can certainly discuss. Maybe we can start by optimizing this vessel, but I think that we're on right now. So, any feedback on this question? What about if we don't look at the ship? So we've been talking about the ship for a while. What about the logistics chain? What do you see as the major challenge here? We discussed safety a little bit, like risk profiles. But what other energy logistics challenges do you see? And we've seen the e-buoy. We have seen the terminal in this session. Is there? Maybe you in the panel have a... Yeah, you can say something about it?
If I could just say something about the training personnel, and I'll tie this to nuclear, just as an example. I said I wasn't going to talk about nuclear, but I will. If you think about each ship having a nuclear reactor on board, you would have to have a minimum of 3 nuclear power trained personnel on board. And so those are nuclear engineers working on the vessel. And if we're talking 60,000 vessels, that's a hell of a lot of highly trained engineers that we would need. And I think with all of the fuels that we're going forward with, I think we found this with LNG, is the training program needed to be developed a lot quicker and a lot more systematically than it was. It took quite a long time. And we've had 15 years of rollout for LNG. We're only at 3% of the world fleet on it at the moment, and we're talking 100% within say 20 years. So I think we've got to get moving on training the personnel very quickly.
I think, but I'd like to focus a bit on energy logistics also in this one. So maybe you can comment a bit on that.
One of the logistic challenges is caused by because a number of the new fuels are, as mentioned before, very dangerous, very toxic or explosive. So that means that you have to separate the bunkering from the cargo loading and offloading. Now, normally bunkering takes place in parallel with cargo loading and offloading and in the same location. But what you can expect is that we mentioned offshore transfer of ammonia, but in a port it will be much more dangerous. So you will not probably carry out ammonia bunkering in a port where you carry out container handling. So you will have to go to a different port and probably also offshore, because probably it's not accepted to have large of these volumes inshore. So still then you will need to have offshore bunkering stations, which is good for us and for SBM, but it requires a lot of logistics because you have to go there and to do the bunkering.
Okay.
That will require more port space.
Okay, well, just to come back on that one about the offshore bunkering, I mean, I don't know if there's some people from harbor authorities here, but I mean, that will change a lot the infrastructures. If you think that you're going to split and get bunkering activities offshore or at the location where the energy is produced, so that could be really far away from the harbors and keep the harbors more for the logistics of goods, then that means a huge transformation for many harbors in the world. Okay. Do you see that coming as well I mean, from MOL as a shipping company, or from your perspective, that will be a very big game, that can be a very big game changer in the organization of the energy market, energy distribution and logistics?
It will depend a bit if there will be a safe solution found to carry out the bunkering of these fluids in port. And I don't know how. If that will happen indeed. If not, then you have to do it offshore. But that will bring all its own logistic challenges. For instance, also you have to store it then offshore. You don't want to store it inshore, so you need to have offshore storage of ammonia or hydrogen. Yeah. And that makes it all more expensive. And that's also in a location which is already busy at the moment. Because, for instance, imagine offshore storage somewhere offshore Rotterdam. Where would you place that now? The last area is already occupied by the last wind park. So that will be indeed a challenge. Yeah.